I've worked the night shift at West Ridge Crematorium for nearly a decade, and I used to believe there was nothing left in this place that could shake me. Not the silence. Not the loneliness. Not even the way the metal doors echoed when the furnace kicked on. Routine turns fear into background noise. Eventually you stop hearing it. But tonight, I ran. And I swear to God, I have never run like that in my life. By the time I burst through the prep room door, my hands were shaking so badly I couldn't even hit the light switch. Behind me, the stainless steel tables rattled as if someone had slammed a fist down on each one. The sound was sharp, metallic, violent, and it followed me across the room. I kept telling myself, don't look back. Don't look back. But curiosity is a cruel thing. Halfway down the hallway I turned. The door to the prep room, the heavy fireproof one that takes effort to close, was trembling in its frame. A deep thud hit the other side, then another, timed like slow, deliberate heartbeats. Each impact made the hinges cry out. Each one pushed a wave of cold air toward me. I should have kept running. I should have left the building entirely. But instead, I stood there with my breath locked in my chest, watching the narrow window on that door. For a moment it was empty. Just black. Then something shifted behind the glass. Not a face. Not a figure. Just movement. A shape without edges, sliding across the darkness like it didn't need a body to exist. And for a second, a single horrifying second, the movement stopped directly behind the window as if it were staring straight at me. That was when the door bowed inward, like something inside had leaned its entire weight against it. I didn't wait for a second attempt. I ran, down the hall, past the furnace room, past the office where my coffee was still steaming, until I burst into the cold night outside. My chest felt tight. My legs felt numb. And in my ears, louder than my heartbeat, was the single truth I couldn't escape. The body bag on table 3 had been breathing. And whatever was inside it, was now on the other side of that door. West Ridge Crematorium doesn't look haunted from the outside. That's the trick of it. People expect a place like this to resemble some crumbling Victorian mausoleum, gargoyles, iron gates, dead trees scraping at the roof. But West Ridge is just a squat concrete block tucked behind a half-abandoned strip mall. Beige walls. Cracked parking lot. One flickering security light that never stays fixed no matter how many times we replace it. It's ordinary. Unremarkable. And somehow that makes it worse. When I came back inside after running into the cold, the building felt even emptier than usual. Most folks don't realize how quiet a crematorium gets after dark. The air settles. The machines rest. The halls stretch out like long, dim tunnels where your footsteps don't echo, they disappear. It gets into your head. On nights like this, you learn the difference between silence and stillness. Silence is natural. Stillness feels like the whole building is holding its breath with you. I walked back toward the furnace room, trying to convince myself I'd imagined everything. Stress can warp your senses. Exhaustion can turn simple shadows into threats. I clung to every logical explanation I could find. But even logic feels thin when the place you work in refuses to feel alive. The prep room sits in the far corner. A steel door, reinforced walls, and a single overhead light that takes too long to warm up. The whole building is a Frankenstein of old and new parts. A modern furnace bolted into a 40-year-old frame, renovated hallways jammed against untouched storage wings that smell permanently of antiseptic and cold dust. Most new hires don't last long here, though nobody ever gives a reason that makes sense. They quit after a week, sometimes after a single shift, mumbling about the building feeling wrong after midnight, or hearing someone whisper their name from the storage wing. I used to laugh it off. Stress does strange things to people who aren't used to the dead. But a few years ago, an old attendant named Harris left without collecting his last paycheck. He'd worked here for 23 years. The only thing he said before walking out was, "I won't be alone with that hallway again." Nobody asked which hallway. Nobody wanted to. We all pretended it was burnout. But sometimes when I'm locking up late, I swear I feel the place watching me the same way Harris described. Quiet, patient, as if waiting for something I can't see. Most nights the isolation never bothered me. If anything, I preferred it. There's an order to this job, a rhythm. You wash, prepare, document, cremate. You treat every body with respect, whether they have a family or not. You keep your head down and you make peace with the fact that the dead don't answer back. At least they aren't supposed to. But tonight, the building carried a strange weight, like someone had stepped inside behind me and the floor was still adjusting to that new presence. The quiet wasn't peaceful anymore. It was thick, loaded, a hush you only hear right before a storm hits. I stopped outside the prep room door and rested my hand on the metal frame. It was colder than it should have been. Not the usual refrigerated chill, colder like the cold was coming from the wrong direction. From the inside. And standing there in that stillness, feeling the metal thrum faintly under my palm, one thought pressed itself into my mind with unsettling certainty. Whatever I saw before wasn't the building playing tricks. West Ridge wasn't empty. Not tonight. The night had been quiet until the delivery truck rolled in, late, unannounced, and without the usual courtesy call. I heard it before I saw it, tires crunching over broken asphalt, engine idling low like it didn't want to be there any more than I did. Deliveries don't usually come after 10. Most hospitals avoid sending bodies this late unless they have no choice. When I stepped outside, the wind cut across the lot, carrying the faint smell of exhaust and something colder, something metallic. The driver barely met my eyes. He hopped out, signed the transfer sheet with a stiff hand and muttered, "Long night. Sorry about the delay." His voice trembled just enough for me to notice. He didn't offer details. I didn't ask. People who work with the dead understand boundaries better than anyone. Some nights, silence is the only kindness we have left. The bag lay across the back of the truck, its dark surface catching the weak glow from the lone security light overhead. It looked ordinary. Completely still. No bulges, no signs of damage, no reason for my stomach to tighten the way it did. And yet, as I reached to help the driver lower it onto the gurney, I hesitated. The bag felt heavier than its size suggested. Heavier in a way that felt wrong, like the weight wasn't just physical. A pressure radiated through the material, humming faintly, as if the air around it resisted being touched. We slid it onto the gurney. The metal creaked, though the body didn't look large. "You good?" I asked the driver. "Yeah," he said too quickly, rubbing his palms on his jacket. "Just, long route tonight." He didn't wait for me to walk him back outside. By the time I finished securing the bag, the truck was already backing out of the lot, taillights wobbling as if the driver couldn't get away fast enough. Inside the prep room, the overhead bulb flickered awake with a sluggish buzz. The room filled with sterile yellow light that flattened everything into dull colors, except the bag. It seemed darker now, as if it absorbed the light instead of reflecting it. I set down my clipboard and pulled the transfer sheet closer. Name unknown. Age unknown. Next of kin, none. John Doe. No fingerprints on file. No personal effects. Just a note scribbled in the corner, found alone. Bodies without families always sit heavier on the heart, but tonight that heaviness seemed to cling to the air itself. Maybe that's why it found me. Most attendants avoid handling the unclaimed bodies unless they have to. Nobody wants to be the only person to touch someone the world has already forgotten. But I never minded. I always took a moment before sealing the paperwork, resting a hand on the bag, offering a quiet acknowledgement no one else would give. Some of the older staff teased me for it, saying I was too gentle for this line of work. But the dead deserve at least one person who sees them. Standing there with that John Doe, a strange thought crept into my mind, unwelcome and cold. If something on the other side was searching for recognition, maybe it noticed the one person who still offered it. And maybe that was enough for it to choose me. Routine. I forced myself to fall back into it. Step 1, verify identification. Step 2, inspect the bag. Step 3, prepare for storage. But the moment I touched the zipper tab, a faint tremor pulsed through the fabric, so light I almost convinced myself I imagined it. My fingers froze. I waited. Nothing. I exhaled slowly, shook off the nerves and leaned closer. That's when I heard it, the softest shift of material, a whisper of friction inside the bag. Not movement exactly, more like repositioning. I straightened up fast, the rolling stool behind me tipping over and clattering against the floor. The sound echoed down the empty hallway, bouncing off the metal and tile until the whole building seemed to listen. My pulse hammered against my ribs. My first instinct was denial. Bodies release gases. Muscles twitch. Fabrics settle. I repeated every logical explanation I knew. But as I reached out again, the fabric rose, a single slow swell, then sank. Like breath. I didn't touch it this time. I didn't even get close. I just stared as the air inside shifted again, stronger now, pushing the zipper outward as if something beneath it needed more room. The overhead light buzzed, dimmed, then steadied. The room felt smaller. And for the first time that night, I realized something unsettling. This wasn't just another arrival. Something about this bag felt aware. As if it knew it wasn't supposed to be here, and it knew I was the one who had to deal with it. For a long moment I didn't move. I couldn't. The bag had risen, slow, deliberate, impossible, and then collapsed back into itself like lungs finishing a tired exhale. The air in the room felt different now, thick enough that every breath came with effort. The overhead light buzzed again, flickering in a rhythm that matched the rise and fall of the bag. I took one step back. Just one. And the bag responded. The fabric swelled again, this time higher, fuller, stretching to its seams with a pressure that looked far too strong for something inert. A sharp pop echoed inside, air shifting or something else entirely, but it made the zipper tremble like it was struggling to stay closed. I whispered to myself, "It's just gases. Just gases." But gases don't move with intent. They don't pause. They don't wait. The bag did. It rose halfway, held that shape, and sank with a slow, weary finality, as though whatever was inside needed time to gather itself. A chill crept across my arms. I rubbed them, but the cold wasn't on my skin, it was inside me like something had passed directly through my chest. Routine. Focus. Stay grounded. I reached for the clipboard, but my hand shook too hard to hold it. The metal table beneath the bag vibrated faintly, as if something soft inside was shifting its weight. The sound was subtle, almost polite, a gentle brushing of fabric against steel. Then the brushing became a drag. A long, scraping pull across the inner lining of the bag. My throat went dry. That wasn't settling. That wasn't twitching. That was movement. I leaned in closer, not by choice but because fear does strange things to the body. It pulls you forward even when every instinct screams to run. The overhead light dimmed just as I bent over the bag, plunging the room into a shadowed yellow haze. Then it happened again. A breath. But this one wasn't inside the bag. It was behind me. A soft, steady inhale. Human, unmistakably human. Close enough that I felt the air shift against the back of my neck. I froze. Every nerve in my body locked. I didn't turn, I couldn't. But I felt it. The presence, the weight, the cold air swirling with a faint whisper of heat as if someone stood inches behind me, sharing the same space, the same stillness. The bag on the table rose again. Only this time, it didn't rise like a breath. It rose like a body lifting its chest. My breath hitched, and for a moment the room fell silent, too silent. Even the buzzing of the light ceased, leaving nothing but an oppressive quiet that made my heartbeat sound loud enough to wake the dead. The zipper strained outward, teeth pulling tight. A new shape pressed against the fabric, long, sharp, unmistakably intentional. Not a hand. Something more angular. Something that didn't belong to any anatomy I knew. I whispered, barely audible, "What are you?" Behind me the inhale happened again. This time followed by a soft, guttural exhale, warm air brushing the back of my ear. That broke me. I spun around, but there was nothing. No footsteps retreating. No shadow slipping away. Just the dim hallway stretching into the darkness, perfectly still, as if daring me to step into it. But when I turned back to the table, the bag was no longer lying flat. It had tilted, subtly but undeniably, toward the edge, as though something inside had shifted its weight, closer to me. And for the first time that night, I realized something chillingly simple. Whatever was in that bag didn't just want out. Wanted to see me. I stepped back from the tilting body bag, my breath shallow, my pulse thundering loud enough to drown out thought. The room felt wrong now, wrong in a way that went deeper than fear, deeper than instinct. It was as if the walls themselves had tightened, drawing closer, listening. Then the cold hit. It didn't creep in through the vents or drift down from the ceiling like the usual refrigeration. It rolled out from the metal lockers along the far wall, an icy bloom that expanded in a sudden wave, clinging to my clothes, slipping under my skin. One of the locker doors shivered. I stared, waiting for it to settle, to return to stillness. But instead, the metal panel rattled again, gentle at first like a fingertip tapping from inside. Then harder. A dull, resonant thud that vibrated across the tile floor. "No," I whispered involuntarily. "No, no, no." The second locker joined in. A sharp metallic tremor shook its hinges. Then a third. Then a fourth. Each door trembled with its own rhythm, like a chorus of muffled knocks, uneven and desperate. The sound filled the room, low, grinding, hollow, until the whole wall of lockers throbbed as one, as if something inside each compartment was trying to push its way out. I pressed my back against the prep table. The bag on top shifted again, sliding a fraction of an inch toward me. Not rolling, sliding. Intentional. The lights overhead flickered. Once. Twice. A long, stuttering pulse that made the shadows stretch and recoil across the steel surfaces. Then the temperature dropped further. My breath fogged in the air. Frost began forming along the seams of the locker doors, delicate and sharp. The room smelled like metal and cold earth, like an open grave under moonlight. A heavy bang shook the central locker door so violently that it bowed outward. The hinges groaned. The screws strained. A dull pressure from inside pushed the panel forward, like something was leaning its full weight against it. I staggered toward the exit, but my legs felt numb, the air too thick to move through. Each step was slow, labored, like walking underwater. Behind me, another slam rang out, louder, closer, more deliberate. I turned. The locker door wasn't just bowing now. It was breathing too. The panel curved outward, then eased back, then swelled again, mimicking the same unnatural rhythm as the body bag. Every metallic inhale warped the shape of the door. Every exhale released a sharp burst of icy air. My mind fought for logic, thermal expansion, faulty hinges, misaligned seals, but none of those explanations rose and fell like lungs. None of them responded to my presence. As I inched backward, the entire row of lockers shuddered in unison. A chilling tremor ran through the floor, up the table, into my bones. The sound shifted from knocking to scraping, long, dragging motions against metal, as though fingers traced the inside of each hollow compartment. Something behind those doors was awake. And whatever moved inside them wasn't trying to escape. It was trying to gather itself, getting ready. I reached the doorframe, heart ready to burst, when a final violent slam erupted from the center locker, echoing through the building like a warning. The prep table jerked. The body bag lurched toward the edge. And in the frozen stillness that followed, I realized with sickening certainty. The breathing wasn't coming from just one place anymore. For a few seconds, everything fell silent again. No rattling metal. No scraping from inside the lockers. No flickering lights. Just stillness. Heavy, suffocating stillness. I didn't trust it. Silence in this place wasn't relief. It was restraint, like the building was holding something back, waiting for the next breath I took so it could steal it from me. My eyes drifted slowly to the body bag. It lay motionless now. Completely flat, perfectly still, as if whatever had been pushing against the fabric moments earlier had vanished. Not eased, not settled, vanished. And that terrified me even more. Bodies don't stop releasing gas all at once. They don't go from violent movement to absolute stillness in an instant. The sudden absence felt intentional, deliberate, like something inside had grown tired of pretending. I approached cautiously, each step echoing in my ears. Just check it, I told myself. Prove it isn't what you think. But before I reached the table, the air shifted again. Not cold this time, heavy. Pressured. Like someone had placed a hand on my chest and pushed. Then the bag moved. Not the rise and fall movement from before. Not the gentle shift of fabric settling. This was different, sharp, quick, and unmistakably controlled. The bottom edge of the bag jerked, dragging across the stainless steel surface with a harsh screech that sliced through the quiet. The entire length of the bag shifted 3, maybe 4 inches toward me. My breath caught. That wasn't settling. That wasn't gravity. The bag moved again, this time sliding sideways as if something inside had rolled over or turned its weight deliberately toward the edge. "Stop," I whispered, voice cracking. "Please just stop." But it didn't. The center of the bag bulged, lifting slightly from the table. Not rising like a chest anymore, more like an elbow bracing itself beneath a thick blanket. The bulge pressed upward, then sank, then lifted again, each movement smoother and more coordinated. It was pushing itself closer to me. A metallic clang rang out behind me as one of the locker doors slammed inward from the inside. The sound jolted through my spine, but I didn't turn around, not this time. I couldn't afford to take my eyes off the bag. Because now the zipper was moving. Not opening, stretching. Each twitch of the bag pulled the teeth taut, creating tiny gaps of reflected light where the fabric strained. It looked like the bag itself was breathing through its seams, inhaling the room, exhaling something colder. I reached out, instinctively, as if my hand could somehow stop whatever was happening. The moment my fingers hovered inches above the fabric, the entire bag lurched violently toward me, slamming into my arm with a weight that felt horribly alive. I stumbled back, crashing into a cart of instruments that clattered to the floor. The bag rolled, yes, rolled, until its edge hung over the side of the table, swaying gently like it was searching for the floor. The overhead lights flickered again, plunging the room into a stuttering sequence of dim and bright flashes. During one of the bright flickers I saw it clearly, a shape pressed against the inside of the bag. Long, narrow, too sharp to be a limb. It dragged itself toward the zipper, tracing slow, deliberate paths along the fabric, leaving the material trembling in its wake. I backpedaled toward the doorway, heart hammering against my ribs. Behind me the lockers rattled again, building in intensity like a storm gathering force. But all my focus stayed on the bag, on the way it inched closer to the table's edge, as though it were preparing to lower itself to the ground. As though it wanted to stand. And in one horrifying flash of light, the sharp shape inside pressed firmly against the fabric, carving a line upward toward the top of the bag. That was when I finally understood. The breathing had never been the real warning. Movement was. Whatever was inside, was learning how to use its body. I edged toward the doorway slowly, refusing to turn my back on the table. The bag no longer twitched, it listened. I could feel its attention, an awful, unspoken awareness, like the moment before a predator decides whether to lunge. I stepped backward again. And that's when I heard it. Not from the table. Not from the lockers. Not from anywhere I could point to. A breath. A low, deliberate inhale that tapered off into a hollow, rasping exhale. It came from directly behind me, close enough that I felt the warmth of it brush the back of my neck. My knees nearly buckled. The doorway behind me led into the narrow corridor connecting the prep room to the furnace chamber. The corridor was dark. The motion-activated lights hadn't switched on, which meant one thing. Whatever was breathing back there wasn't supposed to be there. And it wasn't moving like anything living. My own breath stuttered, catching in my throat. I didn't dare turn. Every instinct screamed, if you move too fast it will follow. But the breath came again, deeper this time, the sound thick with something wet, something wrong. It wasn't human breathing. It wasn't mechanical. It was like the sound of air being dragged through a place that didn't want it. I clenched my jaw, staring at the body bag so I wouldn't panic. But then the bag responded to the sound behind me. It twitched. A sudden, sharp jerk, like whatever inside had heard the breath too. And recognized it. My blood went cold. Something moved in the hallway, just a shift, a scrape, the faint slither of weight brushing the floor. The corridor lights flickered on for half a second, revealing nothing but empty tiles, then went out again as if swallowed by darkness that had shape and intention. I felt it shift closer. I didn't hear footsteps. I heard displacement, like the air itself was being pushed aside. I whispered, "Please don't." A third breath cut me off. This one came from right beside my ear. A hot rush of air, steady and strong, like something leaning over my shoulder to smell me. I spun around in pure reflex. And saw nothing. Just the dark corridor stretching long and silent. But the darkness moved. Not forward or back, aside. Like a curtain being pulled by invisible fingers withdrawing into a room I couldn't see. My lungs seized. The breath I felt wasn't mine. The movement wasn't mine. And when I turned back toward the prep table, my stomach dropped. The body bag was upright. Not fully, just enough for the upper half to rise off the table, the fabric bending around something that shouldn't have been able to lift itself. The shape inside leaned forward, headless and formless but undeniably aware. And then, from the corridor behind me, the breath came again, sharper, eager, like whatever exhaled was excited by what it saw. In that instant, I understood the truth that made my skin crawl. The thing behind me wasn't watching me. It was watching the thing inside the bag. And the thing inside the bag was responding. I didn't decide to run. My body made the choice for me. The moment the bag leaned forward and the unseen thing in the hallway exhaled with that hungry, shuddering sound, my legs jolted into motion. I backing away first, stumbling over my own feet, and then I turned and bolted into the darkness of the corridor. The motion lights finally came alive, but not all at once. One flickered on overhead, casting a weak cone of light around me. Then another. Then another. But the lights behind me shut off just as quickly, one by one, as if something walked beneath them with deliberate steps, snuffing them out as it followed. I didn't dare look back. My shoes slapped against the concrete, each step echoing too loudly, like the building was amplifying every sound to remind me I wasn't alone. My lungs burned, but panic kept me moving. The air in the corridor thickened with every stride, as though something enormous breathed the same space. Ahead, the furnace room door stood halfway open, its small observation window glowing with the orange pulse of the idle chambers. The warm light spilling out looked almost inviting, wrongly inviting, but warmth meant life. I hurled myself through the doorway. For a moment I thought I'd outrun it. Then I heard it, a shuffling hiss from the corridor. Then another. Then the lights outside the furnace room flickered violently, as if startled by whatever approached. I shoved the heavy door closed, but it didn't latch. Something blocked it, a presence, a pressure, a force that pushed back gently like a hand resting on the other side. Not forcing entry. Just reminding me it was there. The furnace room was cavernous at night. Empty metal stretchers lined the walls, their wheels twitching slightly from the vibration of the machines. The big industrial furnace doors sat closed, glowing faintly from internal residual heat. The room hummed with a low mechanical heartbeat. But the air felt wrong in here too. Too warm. Too thick. I stepped backward until my spine hit a metal counter. My chest heaved. My heartbeat drummed against my ribs like it was trying to escape. Then I heard something that nearly dropped me to my knees. A soft thump from the other side of the closed furnace chamber door. A second thump followed, louder, deeper, vibrating through the concrete floor. Whatever had followed me wasn't the only thing awake. I backed slowly toward the emergency exit at the far end of the room, eyes fixed on the furnace doors. Another thud hit the steel, strong enough to rattle the bolts. The glowing seam around the edges flickered, as though something inside cast a shadow across the flames. "No," I whispered, barely audible. "You shouldn't be able to." Another bang. The kind that comes from something trying to stand. Then the corridor door behind me pushed inward an inch. Just an inch, but enough to let a sliver of darkness leak into the room like smoke. A breath followed, long, deliberate, sliding over the back of my neck, though I wasn't close enough for anything to reach me. My legs buckled, but adrenaline caught them before they could fold. I sprinted. Across the furnace floor. Past the blast furnace doors. Toward the emergency exit I'd never used in 10 years. The pounding behind me, metal, air, footsteps that didn't quite sound like footsteps, grew louder, closer, more frantic. The room seemed to tilt with every breath something took. I slammed into the exit door, fumbled with the crash bar. It stuck. I shoved again, it budged, finally giving way. Cold night air burst into the room. I threw myself outside, stumbling onto the asphalt just as the furnace room door behind me thudded shut on its own. My chest screamed for air. My hands trembled uncontrollably. But the night didn't feel safe. The darkness outside didn't feel empty. And as I backed away from the building, another realization hit me with chilling clarity. I hadn't outrun it. I had simply stepped outside where it could follow without walls in its way. Cold air should have felt like safety. A shock. A reset. A reminder that the world outside was real and alive and governed by rules that didn't bend for the dead. But tonight, the parking lot felt just as wrong as the corridors I'd sprinted through. The asphalt stretched out in a wide black sheet beneath the flickering floodlight. A few cars sat scattered across the lot, mine among them, each looking too still, too vacant, like props left behind after a stage performance. I took a step back from the crematory door, gulping down the night air, but the moment the metal swung shut behind me, the door shuddered. Once, twice, 3 times. Each impact heavier than the last. Each one a deliberate knock. I staggered farther into the lot, my eyes glued to the narrow window embedded in the door. It was dark behind the glass at first, just a black square reflecting the floodlight. Then something darker crossed in front of it. A shape. Too tall. Too thin. Too smooth. Like a shadow stretched beyond what bones and skin should allow. I froze. The shadow paused behind the window, perfectly centered, almost curious. The light from outside caught the edges of the glass, illuminating just enough to show contrast. Whatever stood there had form. And it was standing still. Watching. My throat clenched. My breath came shallow and sharp. I forced my legs to move, turning toward my car. My keys trembled in my pocket, and I fumbled with them as I broke into a half-run. Every step felt heavier, like the air behind me dragged at my spine. When I reached my car, I looked back. The window was empty. No shadow. No movement. Relief hit me too fast, too naive. Because then I saw the reflection on my car window. Not me. Not the building. But a slanted silhouette standing just beyond the floodlight, right at the edge where the brightness failed and darkness began to swallow the ground. My breath fogged the glass, blurring the reflection, but the shape remained. Motionless. Patient. Waiting. I spun around. Nothing. Just the empty lot, the silent building, and the humming floodlight above me. But the feeling didn't leave. The pressure in the air didn't ease. Something was still here. I yanked my car door open, slid inside, locked it, and started the engine with shaking hands. My headlights cut across the lot, illuminating nothing but cracked pavement and drifting dust. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe I was safe. Then, from somewhere deep inside the crematory, a faint metallic bang echoed, a sound that carried across the parking lot like a ripple, trailing a cold shiver behind it. Something inside wasn't finished. Something inside wasn't confined anymore. And as I pulled out of the lot, every instinct screamed the same truth. I hadn't escaped the thing that moved inside the bag. I had only stepped far enough away for it to find a different way out. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the echo of that breath behind me, the heat of it brushing the back of my neck. My apartment felt too small, too quiet, too aware of me. Shadows stretched wrong across the walls. Pipes groaned with a rhythm too close to the body bag's breathing. And each time the refrigerator clicked on, I jolted upright, convinced the metallic slam came from the crematory lockers instead. By dawn, I knew I wasn't going to make it through the day without answers. Or at least without convincing myself I hadn't completely lost my mind. So I drove back to West Ridge. The building looked exactly as it always did, plain, beige, indifferent. The overnight frost had settled over the roof and railings, catching the morning sun and turning them bright and harmless. Normal. Comfortingly normal. That's what terrified me most. When I stepped inside, the front hallway lights were already on. Day shift chatter drifted faintly from the office. Someone was laughing about spilled coffee. The contrast was surreal, like the building had 2 different lives, one for the living and one meant only for the hours after dark. Ethan? You okay? Mark, the shift supervisor, looked up from the logbook. He frowned at me, then at my clothes. I hadn't realized until that moment how wrinkled they were, how damp the collar still felt from sweat. You left everything a mess last night, he said gently, not accusatory. Are you feeling sick? You look pale. Pale didn't come close. I felt hollowed out. I need to see the prep room, I managed. Mark hesitated. We haven't touched anything yet. But Ethan, if something happened, you should tell me. I didn't answer. Words felt too fragile. All I had was motion, so I walked past him, down the hallway that had swallowed half the lights the night before. In daylight it looked smaller, less hungry. But every tile remembered. I felt it. The prep room door swung open easily, and the room was spotless. The table gleamed under the overhead bulb. Instruments were lined up neatly on their trays. The lockers sat perfectly still, their frost melted, their panels flat and unbowed. But the worst part, the part that nearly made my knees give out, was the table itself. There was no body bag. No straps loosened in a hurry. No fabric caught in the edges. No sign that anything had been placed there at all. I stepped closer. My fingers hovered above the metal. It was warm. "Where's the John Doe?" I whispered. Mark stepped into the room behind me. "What John Doe?" I turned sharply. "The bag that came in late last night. No ID. No family." He scanned the clipboard. "We didn't get any deliveries after 7. "That's not possible," I said. "I signed for it." Mark flipped through the logs, brows furrowing deeper. "There's no signature here. And no driver called. Ethan, nothing was delivered." My breath faltered. My hands began to shake again. "It was right here," I said, voice cracking. "It moved, Mark. It." He raised both hands, a calming gesture. "Let's check the cameras, okay? Maybe it was misfiled. Maybe someone moved it without logging it. But no one would ever dare move an untagged body without documentation. Not even the greenest rookie." Still, I followed him to the security office. He pulled up the footage from last night. The timestamp rolled to just past 11, when the delivery had arrived. The frame showed the prep table. Empty. My heart slammed against my ribs. "Keep playing it," I said. He accelerated the playback. Midnight. 1 a.m. 2. The room stayed empty, lights flickering occasionally but nothing else. Then at 2:14 a.m. the camera caught me. Running past the lens, eyes wild, chest heaving. I didn't even remember passing the camera. But it wasn't my face that froze my blood. It was the shape behind me. A long, slanted silhouette, stretched thin as smoke, gliding in the corner of the frame. It didn't walk. It slid. Like it had no need for floors or gravity or permission to be seen. The footage stuttered, glitched, then went black for 10 seconds. When it returned, the silhouette was gone. Mark leaned forward. What is that?" I couldn't speak, because whatever it was, it hadn't stayed in the building. And the moment I saw the reflection in the blank monitor, behind my shoulder, impossibly still, I knew. It had followed me here. Before I could process what I was seeing, the feed in front of me flickered again, just once, like a muscle twitch. Then every monitor in the room lit up at the same time. Not the hallways. Not the furnace room. Just the prep room. The table that had been spotless minutes earlier was no longer empty. The body bag lay there again. Not breathing. Not moving. Just there, as though it had never disappeared. I stepped closer to the screens, my heartbeat slamming against my ribs. The camera angle was tilted slightly, catching the overhead light and the far corner of the room. At first, nothing seemed wrong, until the shadows began to gather behind the table. They didn't flicker or stretch like normal shadows. They folded, curling inward on themselves, forming a shape that wasn't entirely human. Then the zipper on the bag lifted. Just the tap. Rising slowly, deliberately, until it pointed straight at the camera. The screen went black. Not all of them, only the monitor showing the prep room. The others stayed on, humming softly, their glow reflecting off my shaking hands. Behind me, from somewhere deep in the building, a single metal door slammed shut. I didn't wait to see which one. I backed away from the monitor slowly, my pulse hammering in my ears. The reflection behind my shoulder didn't move, not even when I did. It stood in that narrow space between the wall and the filing cabinets, a slanted shadow with no edges, no texture, no human form. Just height, darkness, and intention. "Ethan?" Mark's voice was distant, muffled, like it came from another room entirely. I blinked and the reflection vanished. Not faded, not blurred. Vanished, like it had never been there. But the spot where it had stood, empty, clean, sunlit, felt wrong now. Hollow, as if the shape had carved itself into the room's memory. "I can't stay here," I whispered. Mark didn't argue. Maybe it was the look on my face. Maybe he'd seen enough in that glitching footage to know something walked through West Ridge last night that didn't belong to any world he understood. I left without clocking out. Without saying goodbye. Without looking back at the prep room hallway, even though every nerve told me something watched from its shadows. At home, I shut every curtain, turned on every light. But the brightness didn't help. It only cast more reflections. More places for something thin and tall to stand behind me. That night, exhaustion finally dragged me into sleep. But it didn't protect me. In the dream, if it was a dream, I stood in the prep room again. The body bag lay on the table perfectly still. No breath. No twitch. No ripple of movement under the fabric. Then the zipper slid open an inch. Not with force. With invitation. A cold rush of air filled the room, and that same breath, the one I'd felt behind my neck, rippled across my skin like a fingertip dipped in ice. I woke up gasping, sitting upright in the dark. But the worst part wasn't the dream. It was the sound. From somewhere in my apartment, kitchen, hallway, bathroom, I couldn't tell, a soft dragging noise echoed. Fabric brushing over linoleum. Slow. Patient. Searching for the right room. My room. I sat frozen, afraid to breathe, afraid to move the air enough to let it know exactly where I was. And in the stillness that followed, one truth rose above every pounding heartbeat. What left the crematorium last night wasn't a body. It was something that had never been meant to rest, and now that it had found me, it didn't intend to stop.